Okay, so this is just a little explanation of the first few of these practice questions. So this first one is a set of logic gates. So it's asking us to think about an alarm system where you've got a master switch for the alarm and a window and a door, so door B and window C. And if either of the window or the door is open and the alarm is turned on, then the alarm will sound, and that's it sounds when there's a 1 rather than a 0. So it's evident that we need an AND gate to attach to the actual armed on or off, because if it's off, then this will be 0, and it doesn't matter what this is, because 0 and something else will always be 0, and we need an OR gate for these two. So you get all the marks. There's 3 marks for this. You get 1 mark for placing an OR gate and having B and C as inputs. You get 1 mark for having an AND gate and having this output from the OR gate and A as an input. And you get a mark for connecting the N bit to Q. So you mustn't forget to connect the bit to Q. Sometimes people forget that. They don't do that connection. And if you don't do that, you can risk losing a mark. The next one is about TCP/IP layers, and I've just put the answers in here. So addresses data for transmission, that's the internet layer, so it's IP, it's internet protocol at that layer, and it's addressing data for transmission. It's actually involved in routing. Sets up the communications, setting up the communications, the transport layer, that's the TCP bit of TCP/IP. So that's setting up the transport communication and guaranteeing the delivery. Where the network hardware is located, that's the link layer. So the link layer is linking the things in the network, and that's where things like network interface cards are located. And finally, where the user software such as web browsers or email programs operates, that's A, because that's the application layer. So they are applications. Web browser is an application. Email client is an application. So that's why they sit in the application layer. So just moving on to the next one, we've got a question here. This is a 6-mark question, so you've got to actually do some describing on this. When I marked this one as an examiner, lots of people described capture, even though it already says that capture has been done. And so you don't get any marks for describing what's in the question. So we need 3 different electronic methods that we could use to confirm a user identity. The first and probably most obvious is password. So you could say username stroke password combination if you wanted to. That'll be a mark. And then a lot of people, when they came to do this in the actual exam, they didn't get the extra mark for this because they didn't describe what a password is. So there's a mark for describing what a password is. So it's a known string of characters that can be compared to one that's already stored in a database. That is what a password is. Lots of people didn't describe that, so they didn't get that extra mark. A fingerprint, so it's a biometric idea. Doesn't have to be fingerprint. It could be iris scan or something similar, but fingerprint's the most common and probably the easiest to do on this kind of question. So I've said it's a biometric way of physically identifying a person. So you get the mark there for physically identifying a person. And then the last one that I did for this one was email confirmation. So again, there's a mark for email confirmation. And an email confirmation is a link or a code sent to a previously registered email. So you need to say it's a previously registered email because that's the way that it's confirming the person is who they say they are. So you've registered an email address, they've sent you a link, you can access that email, and so they're saying, yeah, that's a way of confirming your identification. And that allows a login, sometimes gives you an access code to let you do that. You could save that the same thing for text message, that would be okay, but you can't you say email confirmation and text message confirmation because they're basically the same thing. Now, there are some other things you could talk about in this. You could talk about two-factor identification, for example, but two-factor identification is not actually in the course. So you can talk about it. You would get a mark for it if you described two-factor identification using two devices and described it properly. You would get the marks for that. But because it's not in the course, it doesn't appear directly on the mark scheme, although your examiners should still know about it and they should still give you the marks for that. But the things that were on the mark scheme for this were password, fingerprint or some other form of biometric identification, and email confirmation, because they're the ones that are in the spec.